Final report. What I'll do is just summarize a few of what the team feels is some key conclusions. Some of those that you just seen listed there. First one, Granite Mountain IHC was a fully qualified hotshot crew, both in standards and training and in work rest guidelines. They met the national guidelines for interagency hotshot crews for while in fire training and makeup. They met the work rest ratios, which is national guidelines is 1 day off in 14. They were on their 13th day. Radio communications, as it said, their radio communications was a challenge. Started out early in the morning with a tone guard programming issue, but the crews worked around that, figured out the fix, and continued to communicate. And then as this fire rolled into different urban interface areas, Peoples Valley, then to the south, into Yarnell, the radio traffic was very heavy. And an emerging incident, that's common as your firefighting resources are moving and repositioning. The fire complexity of the Yarnell Hill Fire. In less than 24 hours, this fire went from a Type 4 incident to a Type 1 incident. And in the wildland fire arena, a Type 1 incident is your highest, your most complex type wildfire. The Granite Mountain Hotshot crew left the launch spot. As the video said, as the report will say, approximately 16:04. They traversed along the top of the ridge about 9/10 of a mile and then descended down into the canyon towards the Boulder Springs Range. This is in the radio communications. This was their process of moving through their escape route to their safety zone, which was the Boulder Springs Range. In that process, the team really believed that the crew was in the process of repositioning, moving to a safety zone with the ability then to re-engage. And what we mean by re-engage is they go to a safety zone, they wade through the fire incident, and then they're able to either tie in with their fire resources, which were all on the south end of Yarnell, and look at and decide on new tactics and operations as the fire moves. And the final one was that 1526 weather update. And that weather update said essentially that you're looking at some wind shifts and some significant winds from potential thunderstorms. At 1550, the first wind shift occurred. The fire started to move southeast towards Yarnell. At that time, the crew started to move along across the top of the ridge. And what the team really believes is this wind shift was what the Granite Mountain crew felt was the wind shift that was forecasted. The first forecast at 14:02 never occurred. And then this one, they felt that first wind shift was that weather update. As they moved down into the canyon, towards their escape route, towards their safety zone, the Boulder Springs Ranch, the wind shifted again. And this time it shifted and increased in velocity and brought the fire up to Canyon Avenue. There's a number of conclusions, there's a number of recommendations in the report. And we'll have an opportunity to discuss them. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott Hunt for closing comment.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank John and Mike and their investigative team for their dedication, expertise, and integrity in conducting this investigation. It was truly a monumental task to work on this. We've been working on this close to 3 months, and during the 3 months they've had to put their regular work and their family activities basically on hold. So Jim and Mike, I really thank you for that. You know, the team they assembled together was top-notch team, high credentials, best in the nation of experts, and Jim talked about those, but they were really a top-notch team. And there are subject matter experts that they brought from all over the country to review their work, also top-notch. So, what are our next steps now? What are we going to do? My first step is to make sure this report gets out to all the wildland firefighters here in Arizona and across the nation. Shortly after this briefing, I'm going to be meeting with the top forestry and fire management leaders across the country and making sure that happens so that this report will get out and the firefighters can read it, go through the learning analysis and discuss the report. The report also has 7 recommendations. 3 are somewhat related to, or directed towards state recommendations for Arizona, the Arizona Wildland Community. And the other 4 are more directed at the national wildland community, all of us. So as a state forester, I plan to consult with our local fire service and wildland firefighting agencies, the Southwest Region firefighting agencies, and to go over those recommendations and review those and see what improvements may need to be made. And likewise, I'll be doing the same for the national recommendations. I'll be asking the National Wildfire Coordinating Group and National Association of State Foresters and other national wildfire agencies and fire agencies to review those and see where we can improve. So, I don't know if you have the report. I imagine some of you have been reading it for a while, but there's the recommendations on the state ones are to review and possibly update the approach to mitigating wildfire threat to communities. That's a large issue, not only in Arizona, but across the country. How do we reduce the fire threat to our communities? Another one is to look at our state wildfire radio communication plan for possible improvements. Do we have enough channels? Do we have enough repeaters? How do we use those at a fire? What kind of plans we have in place? So we'll be reviewing that. And the last state recommendation is to develop a lesson learned wildland fire staff training program at the Yarnell Hill Fire. So we in the business commonly refer to that as a wildland fire staff, right? That's kind of an outdoor training experience for all wildland firefighters to visit that site and learn about it and to promote increased fire safety. The 4 nationally based recommendations include to review current technology that could increase resource tracking, communications, and real-time weather, for example. Can we put GPS units on our individual firefighters? We have a better way to track them. Another one is to charter a team of human factor experts to conduct further analysis of the wildland fire communications environment, determine what kind of improvement can be made. For instance, how can firefighters better clarify their intent when they're talking to each other on the radios? How do they communicate with each other? Another one is to develop national guidance on identifying what point in an incident do aerial supervision modules and air attack roles need to be separated. Those are 2 separate roles, somewhat on wildfires and the air traffic control and the aerial reconnaissance of fires and how they talk to ground firefighters. That's something nationally we want to look at. What point do we need to separate those? And the 7th and last recommended national-based recommendation is to develop national technical information for fire supervisors and administrators on the effective use of very large air tankers. The very large air tankers, such as a DC-10, are a new tool to most firefighters. We haven't been using them much, and we need to get some training out to our firefighters on the best use of that type of tool. And that is my closeout. Jerry? Jim? Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. Now we're going to go ahead and start the question and answer period.
In regards to the 30-minute gap of communication, how can you explain the 30-minute gap from what you learned, and what could you say to the public to assure them that any information about that 30 minutes has been made available?
Essentially, and I think that stated in there, the Granite Mountain crew left what we call the lunch spot up on the map about 1604. And as you read the report, the first time that you hear from them again is 1637. So it's a period that they're moving, that they haven't radioed in, and then there was no communications that there was no communications back and forth. And this is not uncommon. Fire resources were moving out of Yarnell operations that thought that they were in black up on the top. So there was a period there that we don't know. We don't have all the information we gathered at this time leaves that gap in that approximately 30-minute time frame.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that, the answer. And next, yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, Jim. How are you? I was on State Route 89 for about 1,600 hours, and what I saw would appear to be a backburner in the Glen Isla subdivision area. Is that true or not? It was a straight line, burning fiercely, going from the southwest to the northeast along the ridge line. Was that a backburner procedure at about 1,600 hours, or am I totally incorrect on that?
The information that we had, there was no backburn conducted in that area during that period of time. At least the information that we have. That doesn't mean that an independent unit was taking action, but we don't believe that's possible. Resources were pulling out of that area at that time, especially around 1600 is when the trigger points started being hit. And so the Structured Group Protection Unit leader for that area was pulling his resources out. They had asked the question, are we still in a position that we can backfire from the road that they had been working on, the Dozer Road? And the answer was no. And under that scenario, you're not going to go ahead and light fire while resources are trying to pull out.
Thank you, Mike. Before we go to the next question, could you state your name and affiliation? We would appreciate that. Next. Yes, sir. In the white hair right there.
John Gordy, Investigative Media. Chief Willis stated that Eric Marsh may not have been with the crew at 1604, and the report makes it vague about when the division supervisor reconnected with the crew, or if he was actually separated from the crew. Could you please explain where the division supervisor was with the crew at this crucial time between 1604 and the deployment?
We do not believe that Division Alpha was with the crew, and that would be normal because that morning that he had been assigned as division supervisor, we know that he had been out scouting earlier that day and during that day. The supervision of the crew had been turned over to his captain, and so it would be very unlikely that the two of them were spending time together, that he would have been doing his job as a division supervisor while the crew was operating independently under the supervision of the captain.
That doesn't answer the question.
Okay, we'll go to the next. You'll have an opportunity later on. Next question from a different reporter. Yes, right here in front. Name and affiliation, please.
Hi, this is Felicia at the Associated Press. I'm just wondering if you had looked at whether the outcome could have turned out differently had it not been that blackout of communication in that 30 minutes.
That's something that's hard. We can't determine. We do know there was where they were not communicating. We feel they were moving at the time, but the outcome is something that we can't.